Judgment. It's a word that rolls off the tongue with such certainty, doesn't it? Like a gavel striking down on the sound block. It feels final, decisive, and oddly satisfying. We humans love our judgments, don't we? They give us the illusion of control, the comforting belief that we know right from wrong, black from white. But today, my dear friends, I propose a different approach, one that is far more elegant and far less common. Curiosity. You see, judgment closes doors. Curiosity, on the other hand, opens them. It's the difference between saying, "I've figured you out," and asking, "I wonder what your story is." It's the choice between casting someone into a shadow and shining a light on the unknown. And I dare say, the latter is a far more enriching pursuit. Let me tell you a story, a rather curious one. I once knew a man, a stern fellow named Charles. Charles was a judge in every sense of the word. He was a man who could size you up with a single glance, like a tailor fitting a suit. In his mind, people were simple creatures, easily categorized. You were either good or bad, worthy or unworthy, intelligent or foolish. There were no shades of grey in Charles's world, only sharp dividing lines. One day, Charles and I found ourselves at a small, quaint cafe, sipping on espressos. A young man entered, a peculiar figure, dressed in clothes that were far too large for him, with hair dyed an alarming shade of blue. He was carrying a battered notebook and humming a tune I couldn't quite place. Charles took one look at him, sneered and said, "What a mess! Aimless youth, clearly up to no good." Now, I could have nodded in agreement. It would have been easy. Judgment is, after all, the path of least resistance. But instead, I chose curiosity. "What if," I said to Charles, "this young man is a musician? Or perhaps he's a poet, scribbling down verses that might one day inspire an entire generation? What if his hair isn't just a rebellious statement, but a tribute to a dear friend he lost? What if the aimless youth you see is actually carrying the weight of a story we can't even begin to imagine?" Charles scoffed, of course, dismissing my musings with a wave of his hand. But I couldn't help myself. I walked over to the young man and struck up a conversation. It turns out he was neither a musician nor a poet. He was a medical student, on his way to visit his sister in the hospital. The blue hair, it was her favorite color, and she was battling a severe illness. He dyed it to make her smile, to give her a small moment of joy in a world that had become unbearably dark. I returned to our table and shared the story with Charles. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, I saw his face soften. His judgment had been shattered by a single question, a simple act of curiosity. You see, my friends, judgment feels powerful. It feels like certainty, like truth. But curiosity, that's where the real power lies. Curiosity says, "I don't know, but I'm willing to find out." It's the courage to admit that the world is far more complex than we give it credit for. Consider the famous story of the elephant and the blind men. You've heard it, I'm sure. 6 blind men encounter an elephant for the first time, each feeling a different part of its body. One touches the trunk and insists the creature is like a snake. Another feels the leg and declares it a tree. Another the ear and says it's a fan. Each man is so sure of his judgment, so confident in his limited experience. And yet, none of them are entirely correct. The elephant is all those things, and none of them. It's only by listening to each other, by being curious rather than certain, that they could piece together the truth. How often do we, like those blind men, make judgments based on a single piece of the puzzle? We feel one part of a person's life, one action or one word, and we decide we know the whole story. But what if we asked, what am I missing? What don't I know? I once knew a woman named Elena, an elegant, accomplished woman who, by all appearances, had the perfect life. People would look at her and say, "She has it all figured out. What could she possibly know of hardship?" They judged her smile, her grace, as signs of an easy life. But I was curious. I asked her about the scar she kept hidden beneath a silk scarf. She told me a story of a childhood filled with pain, of a mother who left when she was young, and a father who worked himself to the bone to keep the family afloat. The smile she wore was not born of privilege, but of resilience. It was her shield, her way of saying, "I've faced the storm and survived." Curiosity doesn't just reveal the stories of others, it changes us too. When we choose to be curious, we're forced to confront our own biases, our own limitations. It's a humbling experience, but an essential one. It reminds us that the world is not as small or as simple as our judgments make it out to be. Imagine, if you will, a garden. Judgment is like a wall built around it, high, impenetrable, designed to keep out the weeds. But curiosity is like a gate, swinging open to let in the breeze, the bees, the pollen that carries new life. It allows for growth, for unexpected beauty. And yes, sometimes it lets in the weeds, but it's those very weeds that often teach us the most about ourselves and our world. So, my dear viewers, the next time you find yourself ready to cast a judgment, I challenge you, pause, take a breath, replace the sentence, "I know," with the question, "I wonder." Instead of saying, "He's rude," ask yourself, "I wonder why he's upset." Instead of thinking, "She's superficial," try, "I wonder what she's protecting herself from." Curiosity is the antidote to judgment. It's the light that pierces the darkness of certainty. It doesn't just make us kinder, it makes us wiser. It turns strangers into stories, enemies into enigmas, and the mundane into the miraculous. In the end, being curious instead of judgmental isn't just about being open-minded. It's about being open-hearted. It's about understanding that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. It's about looking into the eyes of another and saying, "Tell me more. I want to know your story." And isn't that what life is truly about? Not the labels we slap onto each other, but the rich, complex stories beneath them. It's a lesson worth remembering, because in a world full of judges, it's the curious who find the real treasure. So, my dear friends, I leave you with this. Be curious. Be the one who opens the door, who asks the question, who listens just a little longer. You might be surprised by what you find. And in the end, isn't that the greatest gift of all? The gift of discovering the world anew, one story at a time.